hate bad dreams.
Yeah, me too. What are we doing here? This is not us.
What do you know about us? About me?
I know that you are smarter than this.
I've been on quite the adventure, little brother.
I reckon he's got something to do with that girl.
He's got everything to do with that little girl. You gonna repay me, huh?
Repay you.
For all those goddamn years I took care of us.
Took care. That's what you call it?
The watch is broken.
Joel and Ellie, two of the most iconic characters in gaming. If you were to ask anybody who their favorite game characters were, well, Joel and Ellie are all but guaranteed to be somewhere high on their list. Their characters so iconic and so beloved that they nearly single-handedly ascend The Last of Us to a masterpiece. Without Joel and Ellie, The Last of Us would very much be a husk. You would be left with a world that, while meticulously and caringly designed, wouldn't stand that far out from your typical zombie setting. You would be left with gameplay, which while tightly designed and satisfying, doesn't go toe-to-toe with the third-person combat of its peers. You would be left with a story that, while well told, follows a lot of the tropes of the genre. Joel and Ellie. They're the special sauce that makes every other part of the game click. They're the reason that The Last of Us has been released 3 times in 10 years, spawned a sequel, and a TV show that's now acclaimed in its own right. So, why are Ellie and Joel so beloved? Well, they're well written. But that's a given, isn't it? You could elaborate further and say that they feel human. But that's pretty nebulous too, isn't it? That's the trick with character writing and why it's so difficult. Picking out the flaws and issues is easy. Figuring out why a character works is a lot harder. Humans are complicated, so conveying the human experience in a way that audiences can identify with also tends to be complicated. But that's why I'm here to answer today. Why do Joel and Ellie work as characters? What do the writers do that makes Joel and Ellie come across as being such three-dimensional, real characters? The successful writing of Joel and Ellie can be boiled down into a phrase: unflinching imperfection. Let's break down what this means. To portray a character as three-dimensional, you have to present them with flaws. We're all people, and we're all imperfect, so naturally, characters that reflect us will have issues too. If you only present the good side of a character, well, then that's just one side. Not exactly three-dimensional, is it? I'm not going to belabor this point. It's pretty standard writing 101. There's been a lot of videos on the topic, and I think people get it intuitively. As with everything, though, saying is a lot easier than doing. Most stories strive to have likable characters with flaws. There are some examples that don't go for this, but they're an exception rather than the rule. Still, a lot of the time this attempt falls flat. Characters have flaws, so to speak of, yet they're still about as three-dimensional as cardboard. Why is that? Well, because a lot of the time, the flaws presented are superficial. Sure, the character may have flaws, but they either aren't really flaws or they don't have much of an effect on the story. I mean, the most common example is a character that cares too much. They're just too kind and caring and hurt so much when anything bad happens. Or, take another example. A character might be said to have difficulties controlling their emotions. However, throughout the story you hardly see this at all, save for maybe very specific moments in the story. It comes across as contrived. You can practically see the writer on the other side of the screen checking that flaws box on their character. In essence, writers take a step towards giving their characters flaws, but they don't go any further than that. They hesitate before drawing back. Why do writers do this? Well, take it from a writer myself. As a writer, you want people to like your main characters generally. They're your creations, right? Naturally, you want people to enjoy them, along with the rest of your story. People hating your characters is a real fear. The difficulty with flaws is, well, they're flaws. In real life, flaws are what make people unlikable. If somebody is vain, arrogant, and spiteful in real life, a lot of people probably aren't going to love being around them. I mean, I sure hope you wouldn't describe your friends that way. The same sort of thinking comes into a writer's head. If I really don't hold back, if I make a character super arrogant, then people are going to hate them just like they would in real life. Well, that's not exactly the case. Audiences have certain advantages that us peons in real life don't generally have. Generally, readers have more access to the backstory and life events of a character. In addition, they are often privy to that character's inner thoughts. Furthermore, audiences are aware of character growth and the capacity for change inside a story. Add all that together, and you get an audience that has a lot more patience for bad traits within the confines of the story. In fact, they're a lot of the stuff that makes the characters feel endearing and real. Still, that fear is difficult for writers to overcome. That's why so often you get the superficial stabs at a character's flaws, but the three-dimensionality fails to come through. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Good writing treats character flaws as true parts of the character, not superficial elements tacked on afterwards. This is where The Last of Us really stands out. Joel and Ellie are presented with true flaws, but The Last of Us goes so much further than a lot of other really good works of writing. Joel's flaws in particular are presented so starkly and so unapologetically to the player, without shying away at all. Joel is who he is, and the game presents us with the full scope of his person. That's where the term unflinching imperfection comes from. His flaws are presented without that undercurrent of fear that you so often see in writing. The game is interested in exploring Joel and his character. It seems wholly unconcerned with whether the player likes Joel. And that goal, that very human want to be liked, is distracting. When you feel that writer poking out from behind the curtain, it takes away from the character. This fearlessness has further effects than you may realize. With writing, especially condensed media like screenwriting, there's this idea of multitasking. Take dialogue, for instance. There are a couple of goals dialogue can accomplish. It can advance the main story, it can flesh out the world, or it can tell you more about the characters. Good dialogue doesn't just accomplish one of these goals at once. It accomplishes multiple. The Last of Us is free to worry over whether the player will like Joel. The game isn't concerned with justifying Joel's actions, opinions, or outlook. Instead, it can use that time to otherwise flesh out the world, the other characters, or just more about him. As such, you'll notice that the dialogue does a lot in relatively little space. Each sentence manages to say a lot more than what's on the surface. It's doing the work, so to speak, for many parts of the story. The dialogue, imbued with meaning, has a compounding effect, further fleshing Joel out and making him even more three-dimensional. So far, this has all been talk. Another thing about writing is that ideas and intent are great, but it's all about the execution. When writing characters, it's all about laying brick by brick with care, rather than dumping a giant amount of dirt in the hope that it takes the form of a building. So, I'm going to analyze different parts of The Last of Us, showing how this unflinching imperfection lends to richer dialogue imbued with meaning, and how these contribute to the realization of Joel and Ellie's characters. Boy, that sounded academic, but it's going to be fun, I promise. There will be a lot of spoilers from here on out, so there's your warning. If you haven't played the game or watched the show and are planning on it, I advise you to do that first. Okay, let's start at the opening of the game. Probably one of the most iconic openings in gaming history. I played this game a couple of times, and Sarah's death choked me up even on this last playthrough. Why does this scene hit so hard? It's because it feels real. And why does it feel so real? Well, we're back to unflinching imperfection. With glimpses into the past, which is what this scene essentially is, as we jump 20 years after and don't come back, there's a tendency to portray characters in the best possible light. This is especially true when you're trying to draw sadness from your audience. We've all seen flashbacks like this, right? Where you see the loved one that the hero's lost, usually his wife, and it's some picturesque scene of them together. Hugging, kissing, making breakfast, whatever. Probably with some overexposure on the camera and warm lighting. They paint this past person and this past relationship in a perfect light as a way to contrast against what a character has now. And sure, this contrast can be powerful, but oftentimes it comes across as contrived. You're only seeing this perfect glimpse of the relationship. The Last of Us doesn't handle its opening this way. Even though the purpose of this scene is to make us empathize with Joel and mourn his loss, the relationship between him and his daughter Sarah is anything but perfect. Joel arrives home, too late, exhausted and with little patience for Sarah. He is dismissive of her even. Then, Sarah gives him a birthday present. You see the warmth between him and Sarah, but still, he doesn't exactly act appreciative. He's had a long day after all. He's tired. We see more of this imperfection when we take Sarah's perspective. You see from her birthday card to him, as well as the fridge note on their wall, that Joel isn't home very often. He tries, sure, and that's why Sarah loves him so much, but he's by no means a perfect father. When the world nosedives into the garbage bin, Joel does his best to get Sarah out. You see the love he has for her, especially by Troy Baker's brilliant performance. But still, Joel doesn't act like a hero. He turns down the chance to help others. He's not above the chaos and calamity. He's part of it. He's not a bad guy per se, but he's part of the problem. He is human. When Joel and Sarah encounter the soldier, Joel begs for help, and when that doesn't work, he begs for mercy. What's brilliant about this is that, because of Joel's coldness towards others, you don't exactly feel like he deserves the help. But because he comes across as so human, you still want him to get that help. It induces this feeling of inevitability, of the world moving of its own accord, and Joel's just a small part of it. The game doesn't feel like it's giving way for Joel out of virtue of him being the main character, and that makes us empathize with him even more. Sarah's death isn't perfect. She doesn't tell her dad how much she loves him. There are no speeches, it's just a girl in pain. Joel doesn't get to tell her how much he loves her either. Imperfection, embraced wholeheartedly in the span of about 20 minutes. We're in Joel's corner, empathizing with him just about as much as we can. Time card. 20 years pass. The wound of Sarah's death is fresh with us. It's a nice way of nodding towards the fact that it's just as fresh for Joel even after all this time. We're introduced to Tess. It's clear from the offset that her and Joel's relationship is complicated. The dialogue between them is a masterclass in exposition and character building. We learn so much about the world, Tess and Joel, from their interaction. A large part, again, comes to this unflinching imperfection. The Last of Us doesn't concern itself with whether the player likes the characters. Instead, the focus is on placing the player in this particular world with these particular characters at this particular time. There isn't over-explanation and justification. There isn't telling us more than we need to know about Tess and Joel. We don't get her backstory or his. Because right here, in this moment, it's not needed. The player's allowed the space to take in the characters without worry of what the player thinks about them quite yet. It gives the storytelling a lot of bandwidth to accomplish other goals. I'll play the interaction, and then go over all that we can infer from it.
It's your morning. Want one?
No, I don't want one.
Well, I have some interesting news for you.
Where were you, Tess?
West End District. Hey, we had a drop to make.
We had a drop to make.
Well, you wanted to be left alone, remember?
So I'll take one guess. The whole deal went south and the client made off with our pills. Is that about right?
Deal went off without a hitch. Enough ration cards to last us a couple of months, easy.
You want to explain this?
I was on my way back here, and I got jumped by these two assholes, all right? And yeah, they got a few good hits in, but... Look, I managed.
Give me that. Are these assholes still with us?
That's funny.
At least find out who they were.
Yeah, look, they were a couple of nobodies. They don't matter. What matters is that Robert fucking sent them.
Our Robert.
He knows that we're after him. He figures he's gonna get us first.
Son of a bitch, he's smart.
No. He's not smart enough. I know where he's hiding.
Like hell you do.
Old warehouse in Area 5. Can't say for how long, though.
Well, I'm ready now, yeah?
Oh, I can do now.
Joel and Tess are in a relationship in the apocalypse. The relationship is largely transactional. They are partners in crime, so to speak, taking dirty jobs to survive. As such, their relationship has a very business-like air in some sense. There's a palpable distance between them. When Joel moves to brush her cheek and clean her wound, it's clear that he has some level of care for her, but clearly, both of them are reluctant to allow the relationship to go deeper. They're fine keeping each other at arm's length. They appear to cope by drinking, at least to some extent. We also learn about the world. They're living in a city. That's clear by the apartment building. The ration cards make it clear that there is some government force in the city, likely one with very strict guidelines, judging by the presence of ration cards that distribute food. Somebody has to control the food and who gets access to it. Along with that, we can infer by the ration cards that it's still rough living. After all, ration signifies a lack of food. Then, onto the immediate plot, we learn about their associate Robert and how he's screwed them out of a deal. From this, we also learn that Joel and Tess are smugglers or runners of sorts. Remember what I said earlier about good dialogue pulling double duty? Well, this dialogue is performing triple duty. It's informing us about the character's world and plot. The dialogue is so compact, yet it also flows so smoothly. You're giving the player exposition without them getting the sense that you're just dumping information on them. This economic storytelling works with the unflinching imperfection. When the storytelling is this economic, and everything is imbued with more than just a singular intent, it lends to the three-dimensionality. You get more than just the surface as the audience. The sense of depth you get, well, transforms that flat surface into a three-dimensional shape. I'm somewhat mixing metaphors, but I think you get the idea. Joel and Tess hunt down Robert. When they get Robert into their clutches, they kill him. This isn't a justified shoot, so to speak. Robert is defenseless. He even offers to work with Tess and Joel to find the weapons of theirs that he sold. Tess and Joel aren't willing to work with him. Robert stole from them, and in this world that's enough to lose his head. This death does a few things for the story. First of all, it's morally gray, to put it charitably. It firmly plants Joel and Tess as survivors rather than heroes. This is what survivors do. Secondly, it tells us about the world. Tess and Joel don't face repercussions for this killing. This world, even though it has been somewhat civilized in the confines of the city, is still a very bestial, dog-eat-dog sort of place. The rule of law breaks as easily as a straw. So again, we have an example of the story using imperfection, in this case moral imperfection, to build up the characters and world pulling double duty. Our survivors, not heroes, run into Marlene. Marlene's the head of the Fireflies, a terrorist group in the city that's being hunted down. She's the one who purchased Robert's stolen weapons. She's not going to give them back, as she paid for them and it isn't a charity. However, if Joel and Tess run a job for her, she'll give back the weapons and then some. They make their way to the hideout. Along the way, Joel regards Marlene with a mocking indifference.
We've been quiet. Been planning on leaving the city, but they need a scapegoat. They've been trying to rile us up.
Looks like they did.
He doesn't care one whit about the Fireflies' mission or their persecution. He points out her hypocrisy but doesn't push the issue. Again, he doesn't really care one way or another. To him, this is all a job. It's clear that Joel isn't an idealist, if this wasn't apparent earlier. This conversation is also laying the seeds for the finale of the game. Joel's skepticism and apathy towards the Fireflies points towards his final decision. It's the sort of seed planting that makes the finale feel inevitable. His skepticism and apathy towards organizations and ideals are consistent throughout the game. This consistently very much solidifies his character. It's important because it gives the audience a beat on who he is and how he acts. Again, it contributes to the end. You know that because he's Joel and because he acts like this, that his actions are inevitable. They return to Marlene's apartment. Joel's first encounter with Ellie is her trying to drive a knife through him. Off to a flying start, aren't they? It makes sense, though. Ellie's been raised in this cold, hard world. In a world where a moment of hesitation, a moment of over-ponderous thought spells death. And it makes sense that she's inclined towards quick, decisive action. Joel and Tess learn that Ellie is their cargo. Joel isn't too thrilled about it. I mean, it's clear what happened the last time he tried to guard a little girl. The game doesn't overly spell out this connection, though. Joel's voice breaks just a little, and that's enough. As Joel and Ellie set out together, we get to learn more about her. She's very feisty, that much is clear from her introduction. She and Joel are uneasy and tense around each other. Yet at the same time, she's not an idiot. She's willing to obey Joel's instructions as she realizes he's the expert in survival. There's a temptation when writing a story about two people growing closer to overemphasize the conflict between them at the beginning for dramatic effect. Then there's more emotional payoff when they come together because they had to travel a further distance to come together when they started so far apart. For instance, in The Last of Us, you could have had Ellie question every single one of Joel's decisions to illustrate that she doesn't trust him. This would have been very annoying, though. The Last of Us' nuanced approach feels a lot more real. Ellie really does act like a girl who has to trust this stranger, because the alternative is even more dangerous. Because of this realism, we empathize with Ellie immediately. The game is prioritizing the characters and how they would actually behave above narrative tension, which inversely results in even more narrative payoff because the characters are so believable. The game is prioritizing the characters and how they would actually behave above narrative tension, which inversely results in even more narrative payoff later on because the characters are so believable. As soon as Ellie, Joel, and Tess sneak out of the city, they're caught by some guards. Ellie shanks the guard behind her, and this gives Joel and Tess enough of an opening to fight back. In the aftermath, though, Ellie is distraught over the guards' deaths. She thought that she was just distracting the guards. She didn't think they would die. Again, there's a careful balance that is being struck with Ellie here. On one hand, she's grown up in this gnarly post-apocalypse, and has a roughness past what a kid nowadays would have. I mean, it's hard to imagine a normal kid in our world having the stones and the willpower to take such decisive, violent action. Yet, at the same time she's a kid, she doesn't think things through fully. She acted without a whole lot of thought to what the ramifications would be. She's not battle-hardened and mature, not like Joel and Tess. Joel and Tess make a shocking discovery. Ellie is infected. Joel's initial reaction says a whole lot about his personality. He thinks that Marlene set him up. It's indicative of just how low he views humanity. His immediate thought is that he's been betrayed.
Marlene set us up?
Through this simple line, the damage and hurt he's experienced are implied, but the game doesn't have to spell it out for you. Tess's reaction is telling too. She's willing to kill Ellie. Still, she doesn't fire right away. This contrasts with Robert, where she pulled the trigger without hesitation. This hesitation isn't overly dwelt upon, but it's telling that there are still some lines that Tess is hesitant to cross. We get the sense, though, that she will pull the trigger. Ellie explains that she's immune to the infection, and that's why she's so invaluable to the Fireflies. Joel doesn't buy her story, but he and Tess aren't willing to pull the trigger yet. They escape from more guards. When they get the chance to reconvene, we see that Tess has had a bit of a change of heart.
What was the plan? Let's say that we deliver you to the Fireflies. What then?
Marlene, she said that they have their own little quarantine zone with doctors there still trying to find a cure.
Yeah, we've heard that before, huh, Tess?
And that whatever happened to me is the key to finding a vaccine.
Oh, Jesus.
It's what she said.
Oh, I'm sure she did.
Hey, fuck you, man. I didn't ask for this.
Me neither. Tess, what the hell are we doing here?
What if it's true?
I can't...
What if, Joel? I mean, we've come this far. Let's just finish it.
Do I need to remind you what is out there?
I get it.
She asks more about the Fireflies' plan. Joel hasn't budged. He has heard this whole song, dance, and pony before, and he's done giving idealism a chance. Ellie lashes out at Joel, which is a very humanizing moment. I think one of the most frustrating things in the world is when you're telling someone the truth and they just won't believe you. Tess is won over, but Joel hasn't budged. In fact, he seems to have even gotten more stuck in his ways as the conversation goes. Then, Tess delivers one of my favorite lines in the game. She looks at Ellie, then back at Joel, and says softly, "I get it." This line communicates everything in only 3 words. Joel isn't reluctant to trust idealism. He's reluctant to trust a girl who is like his own daughter. This line is one of the best examples of what I've been driving at in this video. The game isn't concerned whether we get at what she's referring to. It doesn't try to over-explain or justify, or spell it out plainly to the viewer. It trusts that a line as simple as "I get it" can communicate everything that needs to be known. It's the economy of storytelling which adds a richness to the dialogue that really brings out the characters and world. Despite his skepticism, Joel continues on with Tess and Ellie to get to the Fireflies' meeting place. Only, they discover that the Fireflies are dead. Tess gets desperate in a very uncharacteristic way for her. It clicks for the player pretty quickly. Tess has been infected. It clicks for Ellie too. This highlights Ellie's perceptiveness. Even though she doesn't know Tess as well as Joel does, she picks up on what happened to Tess first. Joel, out of everyone involved, is the last person to realize what happened to Tess. Now, Joel has been very cunning throughout the game, and a pessimist to say the least. It's interesting that he doesn't realize the very obvious. The reason is because he doesn't want to see. This highlights, to me at least, that he does truly care about Tess. You don't have denial over somebody that you don't care about, especially not someone like Joel. The game leverages this denial to tell us more about Joel in a very subtle, real way. Earlier in the conversation, Tess asks Joel what he even knows about her. This, too, communicates a whole lot about their relationship and Joel. Joel keeps people at a distance, and he doesn't like to talk about difficult things. Tess holds down the area, allowing Joel and Ellie to escape. Once they do escape, Ellie tries to pass her condolences to Joel. He says he doesn't ever want her bringing up Tess. We see Joel's difficulty with talking about hard topics rearing its head here, and we'll see it play out throughout the rest of the game. They venture through Bill's town together. Along the way, we get more glimpses at Ellie's character, mostly via her experiencing new things. For instance, she's never walked through the woods before. It's something that Joel and the player takes for granted, so seeing her interest in these things is very endearing. They find Bill, and well, let's say Ellie and him don't get along very well.
Ow! Stop! Son of a bitch!
Here it becomes even more clear that Ellie's a bit of a hothead. She knows how to fight, but sometimes doesn't know the best time to shut it off. Her and Bill bicker throughout this entire segment, and their banter is pretty darn funny. Through their conflict, we also see more of Ellie's humor, which again is a very Firebrand sort of humor. Why I think our humor works so well is because it's so distinct. You get her humor and sass immediately. When adding comedic levity, a mistake a lot of games and movies make is to give all the characters the same type of humor. You know, throwing quippy one-liners in here or there, like the script is trying to meet a quota. Giving a character a unique sense of humor is a great way of personalizing them. As her, Bill, and Joel make their way through the school for the car battery, we see the first nuggets of Joel's care for her. She sees a pile of bodies, and Joel says she doesn't need to be looking at it.
Yeah, come on. You don't need to be looking at that.
I've seen worse.
It's a very parental thing to say, and you can tell that Joel is saying it almost on instinct. But still, if he didn't care about her at all, he wouldn't say it. Because if he didn't care about her, then why would he care about what she sees? It's a very high-level, common decency kind of care, but it's still past what Joel affords most people. The same goes for when Joel tells Ellie she's doing a good job.
Yeah, not a problem.
You're doing a good job. I figured you should know that.
I won't let you down with this.
Why would he bother saying so? It's a common decency thing, but still, it's more than he affords most people. That's why the growth of the relationship feels so natural. We're only given these small nuggets at first, and you can miss them if you're not paying attention. And they're not very significant events, even to Joel. He does them without really thinking about it. With the car battery restored, Joel and Ellie are off to Tommy. I've spent a lot of time studying writing, and I've spent just about as much time writing myself. In fact, I'm a science fiction writer with a series of post-apocalyptic novels called the Northfield Saga. Like The Last of Us, the Northfield Saga is primarily character-focused. It's a story preoccupied with the survivors, particularly the main character Mark Northfield. If you enjoyed The Last of Us, I really would appreciate you checking out my series because I think you'll find a lot of enjoyment in it. Especially if one of your favorite parts of The Last of Us is Joel Miller and the complexity he brings. My main character, Mark Northfield, is a man I've keenly spent fleshing out. He's a very different man than Joel, and instead of descending to pessimism, Mark Northfield has dedicated his life to holding on to hope because he made a promise to someone important. It's a lonely life he lives, and he struggles with the moral grayness he's surrounded by. He questions his decisions, unsure of how to live. To cope, he has imaginary conversations with his dead wife for companionship. He's a man adrift, yet still hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the world can turn around. The series has received a lot of praise, winning 3 honorable mentions at the Southern California and New England book festivals, but the greatest praise has been for the depth of the main character. So, if The Last of Us has left you searching for a story with characters fleshed out in such a manner, please consider checking out the Northfield Saga. A link is included in the description. Alright, back to the main program. Joel and Ellie reach Philly, but they're promptly ambushed by raiders. When they escape, Joel reveals that he used to be a very similar raider, killing and stealing from innocent people.
How'd you know
Know what?
about the ambush?
I've been on both sides.
Oh,
It's a very sobering realization, and a reinforcement once again that Joel is not a hero. It's a dog-eat-dog world, and higher morality has never been his principal concern. As they travel through Philly, Joel slowly reveals details about his past. They're pretty innocuous details, such as the fact that he misses coffee.
I really miss coffee.
Still, you see his exterior cracking, just ever so slightly. He's conversing with Ellie now, past just the necessities for survival. Joel and Ellie are separated, and he ends up in the clutches of a raider. Ellie saves his life. Instead of being grateful for the save, Joel lashes out at her. This ingratitude and anger is an unbecoming feature, but the imperfection fleshes him out. Joel is recoiling away from Ellie. It's like 2 magnets of the same polarity. When you pull them close to each other, they repel. This whole time, Joel's been taking care of Ellie. Her saving him is a glimpse at a life where he relies on someone other than himself, and it scares him. He's afraid of getting close to her. When Joel cools off, he realizes his reaction was inappropriate. But he doesn't come out and say it. He doesn't apologize. Instead, he gives Ellie a gun. It's a gesture of trust. Joel isn't a man for close words, so he's showing his trust via actions. Do you see how Joel's imperfections intertwine with his actions consistently, and how all the prior showings of his character lead into the next? It's a layering effect, which, as you can see, makes him 3-dimensional. Joel and Ellie meet up with 2 other survivors in the city, Henry and Sam. Out of necessity, they team up and escape the city. Joel is distrusting of Henry, to say the least. As they make their way through the suburbs, however, he gradually warms up to them. Ellie and Henry bond. On their last night together, Joel goes so far as to tell stories of his past with Tommy.
Shut the hell up.
Dead serious.
It's Tommy's birthday, and that's all he wanted to do is just rent 2 Harleys and drive cross country.
Oh, man. I could die happy if I could just ride one around the block. What was it like?
It was good. It was real good.
It's clear that his time with Ellie, Henry, and Ham is having an effect on him. His exterior is opening. That all goes by the wayside when Sam is revealed to be an infected. Henry kills him and then kills himself. It's a wake-up call for Joel. It's a reminder that people in his life, people who don't deserve it, die. When they reach Jackson, we see that Joel has closed up again. He doesn't want to talk about what happened to Henry and Sam. He isn't willing to delve into difficult conversation.
What should I do with it?
Ellie.
What? I want to talk about it.
No.
Why not?
How many times do we need to go over this? Things happen, and we move on.
It's just...
That's enough.
You're right. I'm sorry.
This all culminates when he finds Tommy. He practically begs Tommy to take Ellie off his hands. His reason why doesn't need to be spelled out. The events of the game speak for him. He's afraid of getting close to her and afraid of losing her. Tommy is reluctant to take the responsibility. When arguing with Joel, he reveals how miserable he was when he was with Joel. They were surviving, but they were not living. Joel alludes to the horrible things he had to do to help them survive. This is reinforcement of his character. We see how Joel puts the survival of his loved ones above all else. So again, when the conclusion comes, it all feels inevitable. Joel's character is being layered again, in a way the player understands without explicitly having to be told. Tommy reluctantly agrees to take Ellie. When Ellie catches wind of this plan, she runs away. This is all we need to know as a player to see how deeply Joel's abandonment has hurt her. Ellie has been pretty smart this whole time. Doing something stupid like this is out of her character. It's irrational, and that does all the speaking for her. She's hurting and she doesn't know what to do. When Joel finds her and Sarah's brought up, he lashes out at her.
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad. And we are going our separate ways.
This is a culmination. Joel has a pattern of lashing out when he feels he's growing closer to Ellie. Her running away, plus this pattern, combine into him saying that she isn't his daughter. It's a burning remark, meant to cauterize a wound before it happens. As with before, though, when Joel cools down, he realizes the error in his ways. He doesn't say so, though, and he doesn't apologize. Again, he's not a man of intimate words. He shows his error through action, by telling Ellie to hop on his horse. Joel says so much without actually saying it. It's a response that's so uniquely Joel. It's a combination of his flaws and inclinations that create the sense of depth, and this understanding of what actions Joel will or will not do. Flaws with layering, with a willingness to let things be, without over-explaining to the player, makes this all come across as natural and organic.
Ellie, get off your horse. Give it on back to Tommy. I'm gonna hang on to this fella, if that's all right with you. Go on, don't make me repeat myself.
What are you doing?
Your wife kind of scares me. I don't want her coming after me.
Sorry for stealing your horse.
Look, come back to town. Let's discuss it at least.
You know me, my mind's all made up.
Ellie and Joel venture to Colorado, to the university where the Fireflies are supposed to be. They don't find any Fireflies, although they search the place inside and out for them. We can see that Ellie and Joel have grown close to each other through their conversations. Joel is a lot more willing to talk about his past. He's moved on from surface-level details about his past, such as that he liked coffee. He's willing to share some deeper stuff now, like how he wanted to be a singer as a child. He's even willing to mention Sarah's existence. His openness still has limits, however. When Ellie asks about his prior marriage, Joel says it's too much.
Have you ever been to one of these?
What, university?
Yeah.
No, not as a student, at least.
Why not?
I had Sarah when I was pretty young.
Were you married?
For a while.
What happened? Too much?
Too much.
There's a lot we can glean from this short conversation. First off, Joel doesn't lash out at her when Ellie pushes the conversation into territory he's uncomfortable with. By Ellie asking too much, it's clear that they've developed a rhythm to their conversations, and she knows when Joel's reached a point where he doesn't want to go further. Likewise, Joel feels safe enough that he can simply say when he wants to stop talking, rather than lash out. In these few lines where Joel is uncomfortable, we understand the development of their intimacy. Imperfection mixed with the economy of storytelling. Joel and Ellie run into some raiders, and their luck takes a turn for the worse. Joel is injured. Here, we see another development in their relationship. With Joel wounded, he can no longer take care of himself. His role has reversed with Ellie's. She is now the protector, and he has no choice but to rely on her. A group of raiders fall on them, the very same group that attacked them at the university. Ellie routes them away from Joel, but she's captured. Turns out they're also cannibals. Wonderful. Joel has to find Ellie despite his wounded state. He's faced now with the real prospect that she's dead, subject to probably the worst fate imaginable. It's Sarah's death all over again. He finds Ellie, relatively unscathed physically, but very scathed emotionally. In what's one of the most powerful moments in the game, they share words together, words that the player isn't privy to. It's a bold choice. There was an easier path the writers could have taken. Joel or Ellie could have said something to reference the past and get some sort of easy emotional payoff, but it wouldn't have been as powerful as this. I think the privacy of the conversation highlights their relationship as adoptive daughter and father now. A daughter can trust her father with words not meant for everyone, not meant for the player. The same goes for Joel. He's experienced a near death of both himself and of Ellie. The effect on him is big. The entire game, Joel has been focused on survival. However, both he and Ellie's lives were almost snuffed out. Life is fragile. Our lives are vapor in the wind. What's the purpose of it all, if you're not with loved ones? Ellie's a member of his family now. He'll do anything for her. Her life is more important to him than anything, even the moral good. Joel and Ellie reach Utah, where the Firefly base awaits. Joel says once they finish with the Fireflies, he wants to teach Ellie how to play guitar. He's looking at life past just survival now. He's looking forward to experiencing life with Ellie. Ellie's off. She's not very responsive to Joel. She's not as cheerful as you'd expect someone to be at the tail end of a very long journey. Joel notices that something is off with her. After they share a quiet moment together, Joel tells her that they don't have to go through with this. They can turn back and head to Tommy's if she wants.
We don't have to do this. You know that, right?
What's the other option?
Go back to Tommy's. Just be done with this whole damn thing.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
This line is very important, but I'll come back to it. Ellie gives Joel a gift. She snagged a picture of Sarah from Tommy's. It was a picture that Tommy offered Joel, but he wasn't willing to accept it at that time. He didn't want to think about her or her death, and he wasn't ready to move on and get on living. Joel accepts the gift this time. It's significant. It's showing that Joel accepts the past and is willing to live a new life. The past 20 years were only survival, but now he gets to experience the joy of life again. On the way to the Firefly Hospital, Joel and Ellie get swallowed up by a flow of water. When they come back up, they run into the Fireflies. The Fireflies don't know who Joel or Ellie are. Joel is knocked out. When he wakes up, he is met with a semi-friendly face. It's Marlene, leader of the Fireflies. She made the journey with her own people. It was a tragic journey with many dying, but she's here now. Joel brought Ellie in one piece. Mission accomplished, right? Everybody goes home. It's clear that this is what Marlene expects from Joel. Her presence here is important for contrast. She hasn't seen Joel in about a year, so she sees him as the Joel she knew. She sees him as the apathetic survivor without a care in the world. She expects him to mosey on home without a care for Ellie. She's wrong. When Joel learns that Ellie will die from the Firefly surgery, he becomes aggressive. Marlene orders her military to escort Joel from the hospital. Humanity has a possible cure through Ellie, but she has to die to get it. One life against thousands upon thousands. It's the classic moral dilemma. Do you kill one innocent girl or save the world? Not Ellie. Not to Joel. The way he perceives the world has been spelled out to the player in a very cohesive manner. You know the moment he learns that Ellie will die, that Joel won't stand for it. Not for an instant. He does horrible things. He kills the personnel at the hospital to get Ellie. When he escapes, he kills Marlene in cold blood. There's a lot of debate online about whether Joel's actions are justified. I've heard a whole gamut of arguments, and a lot of them are interesting. People say the doctors never received Ellie's consent. They're operating on this kid without even asking her if that's okay. Others argue that the Fireflies don't have the resource or know-how to produce the cure and distribute it. The whole enterprise would end with humanity none the better and Ellie dead for it. A lot of these arguments are really well thought out and nuanced. The thing is, though, none of these arguments matter to Joel. Not one whit. Just a little bit earlier, he was willing to turn around and head home with Ellie, foregoing the whole save humanity mission just if Ellie didn't feel like it. Not even from the danger. He would turn around purely if she didn't want to go through with it. So, if you think her life was on the line, it's even an option for him. It's clear that Joel was never an idealist guy. He was never a moral guy. His loved ones are what are most important to him. And that core of his person is what makes this ending feel so inevitable. It is what makes it so tragic, and what makes it hit so hard. Joel is an unstoppable force, and the Fireflies try to be an immovable object. It just doesn't work out for them. This is Joel's flaw. This is his strength, though, too. It's what makes him so incredibly earnest, and it's what makes him so believable. When Ellie wakes up, Joel lies to her. It's not clear exactly why. He could be protecting her. But I think it's more that he's protecting himself. Being with his daughter is the most important thing in the world to him, and he'll stop at nothing to avoid losing her. After killing so many people, he'll compromise his honesty too in a heartbeat. So The Last of Us ends somberly. Joel and Ellie are safe, but there's tragedy here. There's the wonder of what humanity has lost without its cure. The ending is flawed, just like its characters, and that's what makes it so perfect. Writing characters is difficult. The fear of your audience not resonating with them is real. That fear can result in timid writing where characters are compromised to make them seem good to the reader. As a result, characters oftentimes come across as contrived and two-dimensional. The Last of Us faces this fear head-on. It isn't afraid to show you its characters, warts and all, unappealing angles and all, and the writers are willing to say less, which, as a result, ends up communicating so much more. The Last of Us is a modern masterpiece of character work. It's a series buttressed by the characters, and it's something all creators can learn from. I hope through this video you see why they work so well. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it all the way through. I can't thank you enough. I'll have more videos coming on game writing. If this video does well, we might even visit The Last of Us 2. If you liked the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and maybe even checking out the Northfield Saga. This is Calvin Fisher. Until next time.